There you go.
Let's talk about type 2 diabetes, the world's
Yep,
worst kind.
that's
Oh.
right.
All
Much
right, yeah, I
bigger,
think
much
we
bigger
are.
market.
Yeah, I know, no kidding. It's the sinful type of diabetes. All right, so we're here with the weekly Strength Club Q&A. Chase is incredibly tired. Mick has a mustache. I'm here as well. How's it going, guys?
Doing good.
Yeah, man, it's going
Doing
good. All good. Living
right,
in the
so-
free Republic of Australia here.
The
No more
People's Republic.
masks.
Completely done.
Yep.
A
It's an
few months
election. We've got
behind
an
the curve.
election. We've got an election in 2 weeks.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
For the big election for the
The
president,
big
El
for the
Presidente?
king. Yep.
Do you guys have a president or a prime minister?
We have a prime minister and we have the Queen of England as our head of state.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No shit.
Mm.
Chase, did you know that?
Well, I mean, I knew that Australia was part of the United Kingdom at one point, but
I didn't know you guys
still...
were still beholden to the Queen.
Wow, I don't know if beholden is much of. I don't think she really does anything. But
Okay.
we actually have a. Go on.
I was gonna say, like, do you have like a picture of her, like in every single building?
Is she on like your
Is it?
current?
I mean, not because she's the queen, but she's pretty hot, so
Yeah.
it's just nice to have. But there's actually a guy in Western Australia who managed to secede from Australia, so he has his own little country out in the middle of the Western Australian outback.
That's fucking awesome.
For real?
Yeah.
What did he name it?
It's called the Principality of Hutt River. And he found. What's that?
It sounds elegant as fuck.
Yeah, and he's the king. Like he's just like king. I don't know what his name is.
Is he running kind of like is it like a compound style? Everyone's wearing big prairie dresses, and they show.
Well, he has his own currency apparently, and you can set up a company there.
Is it just him?
Well,
does he have like 40 people?
He has a son who's the prince, and I mean, this is like remote Western Australia.
Like a household.
He found a loophole in the Australian Constitution. This is back in the 70s, because he's a wheat farmer, and he wasn't happy with the government's sort of subsidy or how they were handling wheat sales and things like that. And so he started complaining to the government about it, that he couldn't sell his wheat for the price he wanted to. And they just told him to go fuck himself. And so he basically studied the Constitution of Australia, found a loophole where if he declares war on Australia and Australia doesn't reply within 30 days, he is able to legally secede. So he sent a letter to the Queen and the Prime Minister of Australia saying, "I declare war on you." And they just obviously fobbed it off as some crazy nutter.
That's amazing.
And then after 30 days, he goes, "All right, this is my country now."
That's fucking awesome.
Is there like a television series, or did someone make a movie about this at some point?
I think they try and sweep it under the carpet because they don't want other people doing this. But I think they.
Did you guys say? Hold on, Chase. Did you hear that?
Sweep underneath the carpet.
Did he say car or carpet?
Carpet.
Okay, all right. We call it a rug here. I was like, I thought you said sweep it
underneath
the car.
The rug.
I was like, sweep it under the car? I was like, what the fuck are you sweeping under a car? All right, carry on. That would be a great show.
Yeah. No,
imagine that drama.
Well, he's a king now. He's got his own currency. So
I think it's a prince.
And that has nothing to do with lifting with type 1 diabetes at all, but it's a good story.
Yeah. Why are we talking about type 1 diabetes? Do we know anybody who has it?
I think Mick has it.
Mick, because that's why you're so small.
I'm on the cusp of type 2, but definitely not type 1.
You have fatty liver disease and type 2 diabetes at 160 pounds. But yeah, so the reason that this topic came up is because Chase had a little bit of a hypoglycemic episode. What was it, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that. Where his blood sugar got out of control. And then that led me down a rabbit hole of reading about like what everything happens with that and what those phases are like. It's super interesting stuff. Chase is a very, a tenured trainee who has been dealing with this issue or problem for all of his life. So we're going to dig into it, talk about it, and see what shakes out. Chase, type 1 diabetes, what's going on with that?
Yep. So kind of giving some backstory here. Type 1, usually this is something that is genetic, right? Versus like type 2, it's kind of just a lifestyle choice and stuff like that. But type 1, genetic. Me, for instance, what's weird about me is that no one in my family has it. I just kind of like had some weird genetic abnormality, some mutation, and I got it at the age of 14 and have had it ever since. So that's kind of the edge of the cusp of when diabetes type 1 is kind of usually diagnosed. Usually it can happen a lot earlier. I've heard of people having it like at 3 or 2. And that's kind of a bad deal right there. But um, usually 14 is kind of the cutoff there for like a type 1 diabetes. But again, you can have it in an even later age set.
Interesting.
How
Yeah,
did you
'cause
how
I
did
always
you know?
wondered.
Oh, yeah, how did you know that you had it? Like, was there some symptoms that came up, or
Symptoms. So the symptoms were um, always having to drink, right? So my cessation of thirst was never satisfied. I was always thirsty, always had to pee due to that. So actually, to kind of give you a fun fact, so diabetes is actually it's like Latin or some foreign language for sweet urine. So that's how they would test for if you had diabetes or not. Is that some wacko would kind of take a sip of your piss and be like, "Yep, this is kind of a little bit sweet, right?"
Uh,
But that's the reason why it's sweet is that the body is trying to expel the excess blood sugar that you're building up through your urine, right? And that's causing you to drink a shit ton. I would always be very ravenous, very hungry, but I just could not gain weight. My mental acuity was not there. I could not focus. What was really weird, man, is that as I was trying to sleep, trying to enter like into REM sleep, right? I could go into like the first phase of sleeping. I mean, I was always tired, so that was no problem. But the REM sleep, it was like TV static. So like whenever there's like a storm or there's just no cable on, and then you turn on like a channel, and it's just the white
mhm.
noise. That's how my dreams were, and then I just wake up instantly from there. And then just that would go on through a cycle constantly throughout the night and throughout the day a little bit too. And yeah, you just can't focus. Always hungry, always thirsty, can't gain weight, uh, having to pee constantly. Eventually, this goes on, and to the point where, man, I remember one time I was in my high school off season for football, and we were doing like some conditioning hit workout, and I was gassed. I mean, fucking gassed after the first little round. And usually, my cardio at that point was totally fine.
Mhm.
Never been a fat ass, so it's like, dude, this should have been, no problem. Should have been really a walk in the park, but I mean, it felt like I was having a heart attack or some shit, man. Like I could not take a big breath. It was short, raspy breaths. I mean, my heart rate was through the roof. And the coach was over there. He's like, "Lindley, what the fuck is going on?" And I'm like, "Dude, I
I'm
played off. I was like, hey,
gonna
my
die.
asthma is acting up or some shit, and I have no asthma." But I'm like, I think I'm
yeah?
having like an asthma attack or something. So all right, just kind of sit off to the side, and man, I could not catch my breath. It was so weird. Eventually, I think it was the dude who was training me at the gym in Wichita Falls. He took my dad aside. He's like, "Hey, I think you need to go get Chase seen at a doctor. There's something wrong with him. Like my numbers were just slowly draining off." And I think at the
Okay.
time,
So
Is that the kind of taste you pee?
reliably working out at this
yep,
point.
I was
Okay.
probably in about 2 years of training at that point,
Okay.
2 to
And then
3.
like were you of course doing your normal doctor's visits like a kid, seeing doctor once a year. They're like, "Yep, he's alive." And then they
Yeah, I mean,
didn't.
I hardly ever went to a doctor. I mean, it was
Mhm.
like if I had to, it was like, "Hey, I have strep throat. Can you prescribe
Right.
some biotics or some shit?" Other than that, it's always stay out of the doctor. And then this happened, and the trainer at the time who was helping me was just like, "Yeah, something's wrong, man. Like I'm trying to program you, and you should be just knocking out this novice in your program, but dude,
Right.
you are drastically reducing weight on the bar." It was like, man, 5 kgs a week almost. I mean, it was pretty bad,
Mhm.
if not almost like a 2 kilos a session at the time. And yeah, at that point, I got a blood test, and like my blood sugar was like somewhere around in the 600s, 700s. So for a normal person, the range is from like 120 is usually like the highest they want you to go to anywhere from 90. So I was like 6 to 7 times that.
Yeah, and then they just stabbed you with 3 insulin needles at
Yeah,
once
and like
all over your
literally like
body.
in 3 days, like all my symptoms cleared up, and it was totally fine. It was so fucking crazy.
Was that a bit like of an abstract moment for you? Because you were like, "Man, why have I been feeling like dog shit for this many years or for this many months or whatever it was?" And then
Yeah,
it
it
just
was
kind of
probably
like
about
switched.
I'm gonna say it was probably like a two to maybe 2.5 month period of just like I have no idea what the fuck was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I even remember one time like after another off season workout, like dude, my cramps were so bad, and I never have had cramps before. And I literally like cried to my dad. I was like, Dad, can I please stay home today? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I cannot function. I'm gonna pass out in school. And I just hang on. And at that point, my dad was like, Yeah, you just stay home, bub. And
It wasn't
yeah,
like, yeah,
we
we
gotta
should go take you
figure
to
it
the
out.
doctor right now because
I mean,
my
he didn't know what it was either, because like
yeah.
Right.
we just had no experience to this. And then
Mm.
luckily I didn't pass out and go into a fucking coma, because at that point, then you figure out, yeah, this kid's diabetic. But at
Mm-hmm.
that point, that's super serious, and there can be some bad ramifications after my going to a coma, or even just operating machinery if I had this at like 16 and I'm driving and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm. If you're on the
um,
forklift when you're 13,
yeah,
and you
exactly.
crash into the town water tower.
Yeah, and it's bad.
But yeah, so functionally, what the shortest way we can say the difference between type 1 and type 2 is they're both related to insulin. The issue is insulin metabolism. One of them is going to be a function of insulin production versus insulin utilization.
Mhm.
So Chase, you have to take bolus insulin sometimes amount a day, right? And then
Mhm.
fast acting insulin some amount of times a day.
Mhm.
Can you break us down why you have to take exogenous insulin in the first place? And then what are the differences between those two types that you take?
Yep. So Alex kind of hit on it. There's two types of insulin, right? There's fast acting and then there's slow acting. But to kind of basically sum it all up, my pancreas right now cannot produce any, and that's a type 1, right? So type
It's just
2 is,
chilling. It's just
yeah,
hanging
it's
out
just,
in there,
I mean,
taking
it's
a
not really useless. Like there is
uh,
some stomach bile and some secretions that the pancreas does that helps with on digestion and stuff. So it's not completely useless, but it's like,
mhm.
I want to say it's like 90% just
It's
fucking hanging
freeloading a
out.
little bit.
Yeah, it's a hobo in my body.
Yeah.
It's just fucking hanging out, man.
Uh,
But a type 2 for like a person who's severely overweight, your body has now been accustomed to just producing so much huge amounts of insulin that the pancreas is like, nah, man, we're good. Like there's like
we're
a
peacing out.
huge amount of fucking storage here
Mhm.
of just this overload of insulin. Yeah, I'm just gonna like shut off for a little bit. I think the body's good. And then you start having symptoms that I listed earlier. But what's cool about type 2 is like it's completely reversible, and you can kind of get back to producing insulin pretty quick. But my case is now there's something messed up with. So in the pancreas, there's beta cells that produce insulin. They think that there's something wrong with the beta cells, or just some sort of signaling that is wrong, right? I can never really reduce that. So I have to take external insulin with the fast acting and the slow acting.
Mhm. Yeah, and then to my understanding, generally, it's just like it is like a general. I just want to say flatline or baseline of the slower acting bolus insulin that you just take no matter shine, and then the fast acting stuff is more of a in response to. So it's like you will still take it as you're going to have these spikes throughout the day as
Mhm.
you're eating or you're exercising. But like there's some amount. How many times do you take your bolus insulin? The slower acting, is it twice a day for you?
It's usually just once, and that's throughout the night.
Okay, so you do one, and then that's to prevent nocturnal hypoglycemia, right?
Yep.
Okay, and then we'll talk
So
more about
what
that later.
time do you normally take it? Do you get it in the middle of the night and
No,
Hmm.
to
just like right before I go to bed, and like
oh, okay.
my bedtime's fairly consistent, so it's like let's say around 10:30.
Hmm.
I'm taking
Okay, so it's just test, and then Anavar, and then insulin. That's one, two.
One yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, you actually brought up a good point.
Uh,
So, like, if you look up insulin, just plain insulin on Wikipedia, and it will list all of the anabolic fast factors that it does. I mean, this thing is the most anabolic substance that you can put in your body. I mean, this probably rivals test and all this crazy shit, right? The body relies heavily on insulin, and it's kind of constitutes that it derives from.
Isn't
Yeah, it's
insulin
been.
it's a transport carrier, isn't it? It sort of shuttles things around into your muscles and whatnot.
So
Does that
kind
have
of
a sort of
some
role in the body?
basic biology here. So like on the cell membrane, right, you have channels or doorways. You have these doorways that allow substances inside the cell and outside. So think of insulin as like a key, and glucose is a substance that allows basically energy to go from inside and outside of the cell. Insulin is the key to allow the glucose into the cell, and then it goes into its functions of breaking down into ATP, all these other energy substances, right? Well, I didn't have insulin at the time before being diagnosed, so I have this gate that is just always locked, and then glucose is hanging outside of my body, inside my bloodstream. That's where you test it, and you can see like, hey, yeah, your blood sugar is through the roof. As soon as I got insulin in my body, those channels or doorways opened up, and bam, I metabolized so much of that glucose, and I felt like no shit. It was like, imagine like staying up as long as is the longest period you ever had, right? And then topple that with always having to pee, always thirsty, and just always hungry. And that changes like within 12 hours of just like, yeah, you're not symptomatic at all. And it was just like, dude, this is fucking, it was like crack, man. It was amazing.
You're like, wow, thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Man.
I've got to run, boys, but
Oh,
it's good to see you all, and I shall be back next week.
See you, Mick.
Shall be back later, Mick.
We'll be back. All right, thanks, guys. See ya.
Hopefully, Mick gets diabetes.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah. You have one, he gets type 2, I get a third type that's even worse and more stupid.
Type 1A, type 1B.
Yeah, I'll get both. But yeah. So what Chase said kind of keyed into it earlier on in the story. So like whenever his blood glucose was tested before he was treated and before in that initial diagnosis process, his blood sugar was astronomically high, right? Because it essentially has nowhere to go. So it's like whenever he does have insulin, as kind of like our cell signaling gateway or our gateway signal, it allows glucose to metabolize and do the rest of the things that it does. That's pretty cool. And the next thing, talking about his exercise performance, how his exercise performance would be wildly variable. So it would be the same thing as, like if you, for example, like if you being, the audience member didn't eat any carbohydrates for, like 2 or 3 days, and you're used to eating carbs all the time. And then you're like, wow, I feel really weak and I feel really shitty. An acute version of that on a very compressed timeline is what happened to Chase.
Yep.
Did they tell you anything about, they were like, hey, you got to be cautious when you're exercising from now on? Did they give you any sort of guidelines? They were telling this to a 14, 15-year-old boy. So they know you're going to be moving around.
Yeah, I didn't know the extent that I know now, right? Like I could explain my position a way better with the way I train and just what we do with barbells. But what I basically told him was like, hey, I'm very active. I play sports a lot, and I go to the weight room, right? And that was basically all they saw. And the data on training with type 1 or type 2 diabetes, it's kind of limited, right? Especially in the resistance training realm. A lot of it is just cardio, and they understand that like any sort of physical activity, any sort of increase of metabolic synthesis, it's going to help with insulin carrying over into cells, right? So with transporting, with creating it yourself, just a huge demand on the anabolic spectrum, right? But what I found was that this with resistance training, right, as I'm training throughout the session, my numbers will lower, but for a little bit of a longer period than what it's kind of normal, right? So just kind of depending too on the insulin I take. With that bolus that I have in my system from overnight, right, and I train, let's say like 2 p.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then at the early age of the novice learner program, I'm finding that my numbers will continuously kind of slow down and get into a lower realm for a longer period of time than I think cardio has.
Yeah, so I'll fast forward to some of the resources that I really like. I'll put these links in the description. I'll modify the description later. These are the 2 best. I poked around. I did some shopping to see like, has anyone done any sort of like law correlation or like, kind of like a guide for how to think about these things and what your thought process should be when tackling the problem. One from the Sports Medicine Open, a guide or resources to guide exercise specialists managing adults with diabetes. So that's if you're in the perspective, it's like, hey, you are managing someone with diabetes, or you yourself are someone with diabetes, and you're looking for like a decision tree as to what to do. A more general one where you're just looking for information on it. It does have some recommendations in there as well, but it's not as specific as the second, is a paper published in Lancet in 2017. It's just called Exercise Management in Type 1 Diabetes. Both of those were great, and they have a bunch of kind of like flow charts and graphs, some of which can get very complicated. So like this, for example, would be like, hey, this is almost similar to like a decision that Chase would be making.
God
but
damn it.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like it can be a really complicated decision, because like I was talking to Chase about this before, and he was like, yeah, you can just kind of like feel it. It's just like you know
Yeah.
what to do. And you look at like the clinical guidelines for all of these things and decisions that they want to make are massively complicated. So we'll go back to here. I suppose the first thing that we should probably cover is the contraindications. It seems like the contraindicated is if you're having like active renal failure, some sort of retinopathy, or an autonomic dysfunction. Autonomic dysfunction is an interesting one. Like the symptoms of it are basically just everything. Like you have headaches and you can't get a boner and you can't tolerate exercise and you pass out whenever you stand up. It's not great. But like Chase said, most of the exercise information as regards to type 1 diabetes is going to be around cardio. So they'll talk resistance training, but they'll almost talk about it like as if it's sprinting. So they'll say, like, hey, like we have information on things that use certain energy systems like sprinting and resistance training. There are similar energy systems, but no one is sprinting for like 2 hours, but people can be lifting for 2 hours, so the information does kind of need to be inferred, like Chase was talking about.
Yeah, the study that I kind of looked up before the podcast was, I think the sample size was about like 6,000 people. I forgot what it was, but the name of the study, but it was about 6,000 people. I think the vast majority of it was males, and then females were bringing up the lower end. And yeah, so they kind of classified people into race, sex, and then based off of how much activity they're getting. So people who had, like a low amount of energy, or stress. So let's say they're working out for about like 45 minutes to 35 minutes. And then after the low end, it's a moderate. So from 45 to about an hour, and then a high, which is an hour and above, right? The most of the people were kind of falling into the lower extremities, but they really didn't classify what they meant by resistance training. So it could have been band work, it could have been barbell, it could have been what Alex was saying was sprints, but all of it's kind of leaning towards that, the baseline, you sitting on your ass and then hoping that this insulin will do its job versus doing some sort of physical activity. The people who are doing some sort of physical activity, they are seeing better results with their numbers and how fast the insulin is being absorbed and being processed throughout the body.
Yeah, the stuff that Chase touched on in the Lancet paper really kind of like hit home. It seems like people who have type 1 diabetes, they tend to avoid exercise because of the presumed complications. Like if someone says it's like, hey, if you work out hard enough, you worry about having like an event like nocturnal hypoglycemia, or worry about your crash 6 hours after exercise. There's a lot of things to theoretically worry about. So apparently people who are in Chase's situation tend to avoid exercise. Chase has done the exact opposite and has embraced it wholeheartedly. And then his results show that. I would say the major fork in almost all the things that I've been reading recently have been talking about with like aerobic work, like low intensity, kind of steady state. It's like, hey, I'm just going to go for a jog for 30 minutes. I'm going to go sit on the bike, for 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, things like that. We can just expect a steady decline in available blood sugar, right? So you have to say, hey, I'm going to carb up a little bit before that, and I'm going to take slightly less insulin than I normally do, and then I'm just going to exercise if I want to for as long as I can until my levels get sufficiently low, and then I'm fine. And there doesn't seem to be anything past that. Whereas with things like sprinting, which is what they're using a lot to infer with resistance training, so like sprinting or resistance training, your blood sugars don't actually decrease that much when you're doing it, but they can fall later. They may actually increase while you're doing it, right? Apparently that's kind of a response to like some stress hormones. So it's like saying, it's like, hey, you're getting real amped up. So like if you're wrestling really hard rounds, or if you're lifting weights, or if you're doing a bunch of sprinting work, things like that, your blood sugars may actually increase. So you need to prepare for that. So Chase, I'm presumably, I don't think you've experimented with like long doses of endurance cardio, right?
I have not.
You never got into that?
No, can't say that I have.
Okay, so like a few hours.
I take that back. Let's say, I actually, football, right? So that's kind of, I guess you can kind of say that's some
Not really.
Yeah, I know. I guess you can't.
It's so much more
I guess
close to sprinting, no matter what you're doing. Unless
Yeah,
you're
I
the
guess so.
towel boy or the water boy, then you're actually running
Yeah.
constantly.
Yeah, I guess no then.
Yeah, so like if you like, it makes sense because like yeah, Johnny G says his increases when he lifts. That comports with everybody else is saying. If you're going to take like an 8 hour, if you're like an 8-mile jog, for example, you can expect a steady decrease the entire way there. Whereas opposed to lifting, it does have some complications involved. Chase, what do you know about that, and how have you handled that?
So kind of the backtrack, right? So we are familiar with the stress recovery adaptation, right? So that's kind of applied to our training, but let's think of this into the realm of our blood sugar and just homeostasis, right? So the stress, it being barbells, right? We're applying a stress, we're doing our workout, we're running, whatever. The adaptation, so the adaptation for running would just kind of be, yeah, my blood sugar, it's fine right now because the amount of stress that I'm getting, it's subjected to, it's so minimal that I can hang on to this, let's say 150 blood sugar, right? Now we apply a very acute stress with lifting. Now my blood sugar has to spike because we know that to adapt to this stress, I need a bunch of factors into my cells. I need to upkeep this homeostasis. So my blood sugar is going to probably increase to like 185. And now to recover from that, I'm going to just dump in a bunch of insulin or pull from a bunch of insulin that's already in my blood, right? With running, you're using that on a very long drawn out basis. But again, with lifting, it's more acute, and then you're going to see more drops, sudden drops, and then more of like the hypoglycemic realm. Versus running, it's just kind of pretty stagnant. What I find out in my own training is that if I do a bunch of volume and stuff like that, a huge amounts of stressful workouts, I'm gonna fucking tank afterwards. Like I need to eat as soon as I'm done. With the intensity and with this Olympic stuff, it's kind of almost been the same. I think it's just more so it's like how stressed my central nervous system is getting. So, there's several factors that I can't really talk about because I don't know that much about that is being stressed. So like, let's say, with this blood sugar, it needs to be pumped out with all this glucose into my body. It's helping heal my central nervous system. So I need to, again, fix that hypoglycemic episode by eating again. Does that kind of make sense? That kind of was a terrible explanation.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm not sure how it makes sense because I've also just been reading about this recently, so I'm like, oh yeah, that comports with what I've been talking about.
Yeah,
MJ's
exactly.
here. How's it going, MJ? G-Lock's here too. Cool Dude 69 is here. The gang. No Jeff Riggins. But yeah, so some things to, if we can go back a step. So let's say, you are interested in doing starting strength novice linear progression. You're like, hey, this is something I want to do. However, I do have type 1 diabetes. I think, and it works out really well. And to just say do the program, even though you have these special circumstances, can kind of seem like a little silly. Just do the program. Nothing needs to change. But honestly, not really much needs to change. The working volumes that you're doing are so relatively low that it's not going to be a dramatic event, right? So like if
Yep.
Chase went and did like a CrossFit workout and he's strong enough to move like 315 around for his set of like 50 deadlifts or whatever it is, and he's doing, 100 squats and 50 deadlifts and all that kind of stuff, it would be such a tremendous amount of glucose expenditure and such a tremendous amount of movement that he would immediately need to go to like the closest ice cream store and then be like, hey,
And get like a
you know,
4 scoop
like
pudding.
we're gonna be friends here.
Yeah.
Whereas, it's like, hey, you're a relatively untrained person. You're not going to be able to disrupt homeostasis so dramatically. You can go in and do some, pardon me, you can go in and do some lifts, under the supervision of a cutter, decently, decently hard, but still relatively light.
hmm
So it's like the first day that you come in, and then let's say you go to Chase's gym in Oklahoma City, and come in, and you're concerned about these things. You don't really need to be. You won't need to be for a significant period of time. If you want to think about it, where it's like the data that we have, where it's saying it's like, hey, you need to be worried about this big rebound situation that happens after your resistance training or your sprinting work. With like sprinting work, just think about how many. Let's say you run 10 sprints. How much you're physically moving your body, how much you're running, how many steps you're taking. 3x5 of squats, you're standing up 15 times. You're pushing your arms away 15 times. It's really not many. You're picking something off the floor 5 times. It's such a relatively low amount of work because you are starting from a baseline of 0, that it's okay. So I think managing your volumes and your intensity is really important, and then also managing the proximity to bed. So if you train, let's say if Chase did a crazy CrossFit workout 2 hours before bed, had a banana, and then went to bed, he would almost certainly wake up a few hours
Yep.
later being like, I need to eat some food right now. And then Chase, you talked to us about that last week a little bit, or the week before that, saying like that those things have happened to you in the past.
Yeah, so this is kind of like how people die. Is that they've done this over a long period of time to where their body is normal at such a hypoglycemic realm that they eventually they just dip lower and lower to the point where like they go into a coma and their body can't come up, right? They can't. No one's there to go, hey, drink a Coke or anything like that. Especially if you live alone, you can't really recover from that point. Yeah. So what happened to me the other weekend was that, so we were pretty busy. Sunday, we were like, I spent the day majority cleaning the house. We were running around with the dogs. Didn't really keep track of what I was eating. My insulin level, how much I inject into my body, relatively stayed the same. So at that point, I'm kind of just riding this roller coaster down, and then it hit, right. And whenever I get into hypoglycemic episodes, it kind of varies, but the main kind of sensation that I'm feeling is like my mental acuity is not there, so I feel like I'm drunk. There's been times where like my
Do
body
people
will
just say that, or does it actually feel pretty similar to when you're intoxicated? Like, is
the
that
physical aspects of it, right? So like my body will just kind of like twitch and like fall and spasm a little bit, but like my mind's like, "What the fuck are you doing, Chase? Like, hey,
so
read
you're
through the
not getting
flash."
like loopy and happy from like a
No, no, I'm
okay.
not. I'm definitely not. Like I'll sometimes beat it.
Uh,
I'll break out into a sweat. I'm ravenously hungry. Other times, like man, I'll just get very frustrated for like no reason. I'm like, man, why can't I can't fucking lift this cup up or something like that. It's weird. It's a totally weird sensation. But the best way I can kind of describe it is, try not to eat anything and then do something very hard or taxing and then see how you feel afterwards. And that's kind of sort of how being low feels.
Interesting. We got Josh in the chat too. Josh said he's been a type 1 diabetic. He's been on the NLP since January. He went from 175 to 12. His A1c stayed consistent the entire time
Nice.
since January. Yeah, that's a pretty decent timeline, man. Yeah, good work. I'm curious what starting numbers were, age, things like that. Chase, is that relatively consistent when you worked with other people who've been type 1s in the past?
I haven't really worked with any other type ones, but just from my own experience, yeah. So
Yeah.
for people who don't know what an A1c is, it's basically just your average uh, blood glucose reading throughout an extended period of time, right? So you usually get it tested about 3 months, every 3 months, 6 months, and the doctor will say, "Yep, you're averaging about like a 6 point something," and then that coalesces into like, yeah, you're around like 130 for your average blood sugar or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The lower the A1c, the better, of course. The higher it is, you're bad, right? But yeah, I've typically seen like, yeah, as my body weight is increased, it's been more muscle mass. So my metabolic demand has been increased. So I can now throw all this blood sugar, this blood glucose at it, and my A1c has been relatively good.
Yeah, so like if in the big problem of like glucose metabolism, if you're looking for ways to use it, resistance training and having more muscle mass is a really good way to do that.
Yep.
It's just kind of like a passive way to increase your ability to metabolize glucose without without having to be constantly jogging or walking or things like that. Yeah, that's interesting, Josh. Curious to hear about numbers. Hopefully you're
Mhm.
pretty tall. If Josh is like, yeah, I'm 5'3", and I'm like, damn, 212, 5'3".
Hell yeah.
But yeah, so avoid training right before bed. I would sincerely recommend, all the literature has done it, to train relatively earlier in the day, right? So you can get
Mhm.
ahead of these things so that you could avoid any sort of nighttime event like Chase has been talking about. Trying to figure that out with your workday, that may be a little bit hard. How have you been doing with like meal timing? Are you like very specifically being like, I got to eat 2.5 hours before I train, and then I take a little bit of insulin, 5 minutes after that, before anything like that, or are you
Um,
just not that specific with it?
I'll usually eat my meal before training about sometimes 3 to 2 hours, and that usually
Hmm.
works. I'll kind of again still be on like the little higher end. I'll usually be about like in the 200 sometimes before pre working out, and then I'm kind of expecting that, and I'm okay with that because then I'll fall down to like in the double digits sometimes and be totally okay with that. Sometimes
Hmm.
it's bad. Just again, it kind of just depends on what I'm doing with my exercise that day. But for the most part, it usually helps. And I mean, hell, I've seen it sometimes where I've tested it. I'm in the mid threes, and I've gone down to like 70. It's been that
Hmm.
bad of a drastic swing.
Yeah,
And
and Chase,
again,
you're
like,
probably about like 6'1", 245-ish, somewhere around there.
yep, yep.
Okay,
And,
yeah.
and
So
again, like
Chase is a
I have
significant amount
taken,
of person for reference.
yeah, and I have taken
Yeah.
insulin though. Like let's say as I tested, I'd taken a little bit, but it's not like I'm taking 30, milliliters of insulin and just hoping for the best there. It's been about like maybe 5 to 10 units of insulin, and it's been totally fine.
Hmm. One of the big recommendations across this, the really the theme for all of this is you need to expect that there will be kind of rises and falls to blood sugar, and then you also need to figure out what your trends are.
Hmm.
So like keeping a journal with this has been highly recommended. So it's like, hey, let's say if you've just been you're Josh, you've been lifting 3 times a week for 4-ish months, you're doing really well. You want to add in, let's say, a conditioning day to kind of get your lungs going. He should probably be, checking blood sugar maybe like 1 or 2 times in the morning. He'll go and train in the afternoon and then check it again immediately afterwards. And then that may not be consistent. It's not kind of a one and done thing. You want to run that whole thing 3 separate times, get your
Hmm.
data going across 3 weeks, and then you can be more confident, and you want it to check so often. And then you do want to figure out where it's like, hey, are you one of those people who does have a little bit of a crash? It may not be so immediate like Chase. It may be 2.5 hours after you train. So you may say, oh, I don't really need to go eat right now. And then, you're driving home from work, it's 5:30, and then you feel like crap,
Yeah.
um, so those are the things to check in on, is that there certainly can be time delays to how all of these things are feeling. I wanted to pull these up. Let's see. Chase, can you see this?
No, I just see the PowerPoint.
I mean
Oh,
this
right there.
this
Yeah.
image on the PowerPoint?
Yeah. The little flow chart here.
Yeah, yeah. So both of the papers that we'll toss down in the bottom, have like these pretty convenient charts to them. They do have kind of different, almost generally different operational procedures if you are using a continuous insulin pump. Chase, have you ever looked into using one of those? Have you ever used one across
Yeah,
your
actually,
across your
I've
life?
used it a while. And then with all the COVID bullshit, the supply chain has just been kind of ruined all that, and I'm back to shots now. But I highly recommend a pump. And what really helped me too, and actually I've kind of
Can you tell us
experienced.
what a pump is real quick?
Yeah, so it's basically a crude version of a pancreas, right? It's an external pancreas in a way, right?
Just slap it
Um,
on.
yeah, I
Uh,
mean it is. So it's a device that is continuously supplying insulin into your body via like I've seen it where it's kind of just like a patch, and they have a reservoir in that patch that just will secrete insulin, or a bolus, let's say a unit and a half every 45 minutes or something like that, right? And it will kind of depend on where you're at with your A1c and your numbers, and you talking with your doctor, your endocrinologist about how what the ratio is and stuff like that. But I had one where it was tubing, right? So the pump had a little reservoir, and it was attached to a site on my thigh, and then connected via tubing, and it would just slowly just pump insulin throughout the day.
Yeah. So the benefits for the continuous insulin pump, and it's the second diagonal block about like right here, that says is the person using one of these pumps. It tries to replicate the more natural curve of production that you would have, as opposed to having to do kind of two different types. Where Chase is saying that he was using that slower acting and then a faster acting at different times of the day. So instead of having to juggle those things, you can tend to just use these. So not to belabor this whole chart thing, because again they do get very complicated, but basically it's just like, is it too low, you need to eat something, take a little insulin. Is it too high, figure out, is it because of excessive ketone production, is it because you ate way too much relatively fast carbohydrates and then had no or too much insulin. It's kind of this interesting balancing point. And then they do have different like desired ranges. So like if you're getting closer to that kind of like 10 to 15 area, you can do generally both. If you're already really low, like it may not be great to start doing very high intensity work.
Yeah.
You could probably get away with a little bit of like jogging, something like that, but it's probably not the best idea. But yeah, all interesting stuff. Do you think that you would really have to, if you're guiding, let's say Josh here, if you're guiding Josh through his NLP, what would you be on the lookout for, if anything, for someone who has type 1 diabetes? Like, would you think you'd have to change anything early? Do you think you'd have to, be on top of anything else?
Mainly just how he's feeling throughout the workout, right? So, and again, this can go into what he did pre-workout. So, did he eat? Did he not eat? Did he take any insulin? Did he take too much? And all those factors kind of compound into what he's experiencing during the workout. And it is a simple fix if you catch it early. So, like if Josh is kind of feeling some hypoglycemia coming on, hey, go get a Gatorade, go get a soda, and then come back.
To a quite quick question.
Yep.
So like, let's say Phoebe, for giving a little Phoebe for a minute, let's say if you kind of mismanage this, Phoebe would be like, hey, go eat a Snickers, go.
Oh yeah, she
chuck
sees
some
it.
Sour Patch.
Yeah, it's so
She
funny.
can see that.
Yeah, like I remember one time, like like I woke up kind of low, and it's just kind of like I had some like wacky, kind of just body movements. And she's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm totally fine." In my mind, I'm like, just trying to play it cool. I'm like, "Dude, I don't know what the fuck is going on." And that's the weirdest thing. It's
Yeah.
like something is up, but you don't know like it's actually happening. And then like whenever you finally get some sugar, you're like, "Yeah, I'm a dumbass. I was having an episode." But it's so
Right.
weird, man. It plays on you like that. And she's just like, "Here, drink this orange juice." And then I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'm fucked up."
Yeah. So like it's good to be in good communication with these things. So it's like, if you know someone sufficiently well, that person will probably be able to spot it. So it's like, if let's say if you're trading it with your at home, just if your wife is she's in the office or something like that, and you're out in the garage lifting, just say like, hey, I'm gonna go do a thing. Like, people around you should kind of understand the situation. So like, let's say if you go to the strength gym, like, you'll tell your coach and say, hey, I'm a type 1 diabetic. These are the things you should be looking for. And then Chase, presumably after knowing, X Josh person for long enough, he'll be able to see those things and be like, all right, this guy's starting to act like a little bit of a weenie, and he's 45 minutes into a session. He still has, like 6 sets to get through. Like, let's get him a cookie, let's get him some orange juice, something like that. And then things on like the faster acting end of the spectrum, like Chase said, like orange juice would be a good one, honey would be a good one. What are some carbohydrates that you kind of take if you're thinking like, all right, I'll kind of need my blood sugar to be higher a little bit later? Things that would be like
I like
slower
rice,
acting.
man.
Like rice? Okay.
Rice is very pre-workout. I like to have rice for breakfast and stuff like that. So like rice and eggs, and some sort of meat. It really kind of spikes up my blood sugar pretty fast. Potatoes, on the other hand, I've kind of seen that starches are more complex carbohydrate, so it'll take a little bit of a longer period. And I found that they actually help keep my blood sugar a little bit at kind of a stasis level, but will kind of not let me hit drops as frequently post workout. But I find that like it just tweaking and modifying that. If I'm hitting like some EMOMs, or if I'm hitting a bunch of volume stuff on my squat, I'm gonna have some rice because the potatoes are just not cutting it, right? But if I'm just doing a bunch of like upper body stuffs, and not really hitting my squats real hard, or I'm just rack pulling like a triple or a single, I'm going to be okay with potatoes that day.
Yeah, it's a very, like, if you just look up the glycemic index for food, that generally would
Yep.
kind of go hand in hand with like
Yep.
how fast these things are going to be like digested and metabolized. So like yeah, if you're having like a glucose tablet or like honey, Sour Patch Kids, whatever, that's going to be off the cuff, off the blocks, really really quick.
Yep.
Things like an oatmeal, things like a potato, those would be things that would have that slower curve. So like if Chase is just kind of walking around, is in an amusement park for the day, he doesn't really need to have any hyper available resources. He can just have some more complex carbs a little bit earlier on in the day and be fine. Whereas something that I think I'm sure everyone has their own individual experiences, you probably have to workshop in like which of these carb sources work the best for you.
You just have to do some experimenting and some just some play with it.
All right, man. We have 15 minutes left. We got a few form checks to get through. I'm curious about Josh's numbers now. He said he was at 175 for triples in January on the bench, and then 185s on the squat, and did not deadlift. So I don't know what where we finished. He left us at a cliffhanger. Yeah. So this was the starting. He's 6'1", 6'1", 212.
Dude, he needs to be.
That's decent.
Yeah, he needs to still be about like 255.
Man, when are you going to get to 255? Are you still trying?
I'm there. I'm pretty flatlined at 250. My biggest problem is like, man, I don't have enough time after my workout to eat, and I've been kind of seeing that like I'm slowly starting to kind of lose weight a little bit because I'm just eating 2 meals a day.
Yeah.
And I like it sometimes because my numbers are good like that, but I know it doesn't help with the body weight increase.
Yeah, fasting windows, everybody. With the recent surge in fasting, that's not something that type 1 diabetics have the luxury of playing around with.
No. That has bit me in the ass several times.
I actually have one of my clients. He's a California guy. He's like Ventura or something in California. He's been doing like 4-hour feeding windows. So basically, he will like not have breakfast. He'll have maybe like a snack to kick his feeding window off at lunch, and then have dinner pretty shortly after that. And then he'll work out still in that fasted state. And he'll be like, man, I just have this mental fog. I just can't really,
I wonder why.
muster anything for the workout, And I'm like, come on, man, just eat a banana, eat something. Come on. I've been trying to, it's been weeks of him being like, I had to cut my session short. I just didn't even know what I was doing. Just all fogged up. It's like, hey, I don't know what to tell you.
Yep.
But all right, I'm going to pull some of these form checks up. Chase, you talk sweet nothings to the audience, please.
Dude, if that guy, if he drinks like a bunch of tea, to slip in some like sweet tea, and it's gonna be
I just
amazing.
Put some more Splenda in there. Don't worry about it.
No, fuck Splenda. I mean, that's like a not actual sugar. I'm talking about like some fucking pure cane sugar in that bitch, and watch his exercises just be amazing.
We got one from Millen Chicks again. You remember Millen Chicks?
Yes.
Yeah, he's all yarmulke.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
He had kind of like the weird squat, right, where he was just kind of.
Yeah, he was very narrow in his squat, and he was just hitting his thighs constantly. Is what was going on. Oh, nice. So he hit the big 4 plates. The last time we saw his deadlift, I want to say, was in the lower 3s. So he's been making decent progress. He's in some country that uses military time, so already 2 out of 10.
How do you feel about this video? Is real choppy with you?
It's a little choppy.
Well, anyways, I feel like probably he's just kind of wanting to pull with his back a little bit. I think Milenchik's try kind of playing with the belt here. You're really not set in the low bar and the low back rather completely before pulling. It could be the belt's on too tight or just it's just too big for you. Let's see about pulling without it for a little bit. But you have got to feel the difference between pushing with the legs versus pulling with the back. The back just remains rigid. It just changes angle, right? So your hips are just extending and your back is just remaining flat. and you're standing more erect. But the way to do that is you are thinking about pushing the floor away, really using your quads to stand up.
Yeah. The one thing that I've been trying to explain to people recently is like right now, when he's trying to set his back, it is a low to no pressure situation. Nothing is happening to him. He's not even holding the weight. It is like the easiest time for you to set your back. Don't try to do it whenever you're already moving the bar. Just get into the correct configuration. You can just do it. Absolutely no pressure at all. And then you can start getting tight as you start pulling the slack out of the bar. If you just can't do it in that low or no pressure situation, generally something is wrong with your setup. So like Chase was saying, could be the belt. I think it could be the stance. I think your toe angle's a little bit oddly wide. I don't know if you need the toe angle. The grip is a little bit wide too. His arms are kind of bent around his legs at the bottom. I would widen everything up. Use that extra space to push your stomach down in between your legs, and then go from there. But these are solid. He has pretty long arms. This guy.
This really isn't bad. Just some small fixes.
Yeah, this is always terrible when that happens. See that, Chase?
Oh, or like
when the shit's tucked under the belt.
I make it a top priority to always like pull my. I guess what is that? It's like your midriff out from underneath your belt.
Yeah, I always just wear a crop top when I lift. That's probably the solution.
Yeah, you can.
But Josh said he's working on getting to 242 for a competition in August. That's real close, buddy. Our numbers now are 255 on the bench, 295 for a 3x5 on the squat, and his last set of 5 deadlifts was 330. You're gifted at the bench, my friend. Compared, if your bench is that close to your squat, that must be nice. How do you feel about those numbers for someone who is 6'1", 212 right now, Chase?
Very low. Very, very low. But I mean,
no mercy.
School, I guess, kind of just put a damper on your momentum, like you were saying. But I mean, dude, it sounds like you just need to do it novice linear program all the way up until about like a week before your meet day, and then like the week of the meet, just hit like a few singles on Monday if your meet's on Saturday. Take a little bit of a rest Wednesday, warm up Friday, and then, dude, you should be solid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm curious to see if you're still actually like on a true LP. If you're still adding a little bit, maybe you started micro-loading things. I'm not sure. But seeing as you already started doing singles on the bench, who knows?
Yeah.
So this is a single from Milanchik's here, and this is a good angle for us so that we can see depth. The issue with him historically is that he's had a hard time getting down to depth. His stance has been a little bit narrow, knees have been a little bit forward. I'm going to try and pause this right at his depth frame, so we'll see. Chase, what do you think?
That's high, man.
A little bit high? Yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm.
The Adidas never lied.
I know, he fucked up.
Yeah, wear different ones if you're going to do that today, man.
But no, it looks. He looks like he's bending at the hips and knees. Fairly at the same time. I would like to see him lean over a little bit more, kind of get his ass back more. But I think if we were to see this at a different angle, I wonder how his knees are, right? And relative to, are they going out enough? Is there enough room for his torso to fall down? And
oh yeah, G-Lock, I'm pausing this a lot, so that could be making it seem like it's choppy, where it's actually me just pausing it to like look at things, or it could be choppy. I don't know, man. I don't know.
It's a little bit choppy. I'm not gonna lie.
Probably a little bit choppy, a little chip chop. Yeah. So interesting here. I think he's just on his toes. I think he's on his toes through the entire thing.
Ooh,
oh, Steve's here. What does Steve say? Alex, turn off your camera when you share a video. Your camera and the video are slow. I'm just getting shit on today, boys.
Alex.
I'm just getting destroyed. All right. Well, we're on a freeze frame for now, everybody. Okay. All right. So we're not even playing it right now. Okay. Here we go. I've just been training nothing with the bench for 2 years. I highly agree with you, Chase. Man, hopefully it was the bench and some curls at least. Yeah. Not just the bench. But yeah, I think Milanchik's is on his toes here. What do you think? Yeah, I think if you do watch this Milanchik's, go back and watch the knee valgus episode that I did, and then look at some of the samples. It was, who did I put up there? It was Ben Pollock and Jessica, what's her last name? Butner. And then look at them.
The Canadian chick.
Yeah, Butner. At the bottom of their squat, they're like, they're their pecs are, maybe an inch and a half, 2 inches away from their knees.
Yeah.
They're real bent over. They're real loaded into the hips. They're driving their hips out of the bottom, whether you ask them to or not. Whenever it's like that, when we're saying lean over, that's what we mean.
Yep.
That way, because you're on your toes right now. I wonder how heavy this was too. I'm curious about that. All right. We got one from Harry O here.
Harry O, nice.
Oh man, Harry O has an interesting, has a very interesting rack position. So we're gonna try the Steven method here. I'm going to.
Oh shit, dude, this is funny.
You can see this already.
Yeah, so this is crazy, right? So we have open houses every Saturday, right? Well, there was a guy, no shit, who came in like this. And he's like, "Hey man, I'm having pain in my shoulder." I'm like, "Okay, well, when do you feel it? Like what exercise and stuff like that?" And he goes, "Well, it's on my press." So we check out his press, totally fine. Like, kind of shitty with not shrugging and the bar's a little bit out in front, but totally cleaned it up. And I was like, "Hey, how does this feel?" He's like, "Oh, this feels way better." I was like, "Well, did you feel any pain?" He's like, "No." I was like, "All right, well then how is your squat?" He goes, "Well, yeah, sometimes I feel some pain on the squat." And no shit, it looks identical to this. I'm like, "What's wrong?" Like, he's like, "Well, I don't have enough mobility." And I'm like, "Well, hold on, come back out." So I mashed on where the bar needs to be. And I was like, "Here, bring your hands back in, hand placement, all that jazz." Literally puts the bar perfectly into position. I mean, has no issue with mobility. And he goes, "Yeah, this feels amazing." I'm like, "Are you serious? Like, come on, man."
Is this a joke?
Yeah.
Is the video still choppy, Chase?
No, this is better.
Okay. All right. Steven Roomberg, everybody. Tech support pro here. That could be it too. I also noticed that I get a lot of different video formats or file formats in these things. Not everyone sends in a nice MP4. This is an interesting gym to start. This is kind of like this seems like an antique old style gym. His girlfriend or wife behind him has the offset ponytail and a crop top. Can you see that, Chase?
Yeah, I see the crop top. I can't really see the ponytail though.
She has an offset ponytail. It's like off the side. This is very 90s throwback, and our boy is just going like ass to grass with this weird ass squat. Yeah. So how would you direct someone if you were consulting with someone remotely? How would you suggest they fix this? What video, article, what would you do?
There's several videos, but the big thing is just like, look, I think actually the bar may be a little bit too low.
High.
Yeah. So getting the elbows down is going to be the big thing here. And usually like we're not so adamant about grip here, but like this is like a major problem to where this is affecting multiple things, right? So he can't really lean over enough because the bar is going to like just fucking scalp the back of his head. Yeah. He's got to get his hands more on the bar. I would actually say, hey, let your wrists bend and your elbows droop down to your sides. And then see if you can't actually scooch in your grip placement. So like usually the bars will have some score marks. Put your finger within those score marks and you should be fine. But
yeah, he's real wide.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is interesting. So some people will do this where they'll just kind of like table their elbows up. Some people have zero discomfort doing this. Bless their heart. It's a very interesting position if you think about where their shoulder blade is in relationship to their humerus. But yeah, so how I've tended to fix this is just is having someone just kind of walk past the bar to start and then just seating it on their back and then getting their hands up to it. So it's like their arms are down at their side, they walk under the bar, they put the bar somewhere on their back, and then they pick their hands up. That probably would have been helpful if my hammer was on. So I'll just have them walk under the bar. I'll get, the bar somewhere on their back, and I'll just have them just their arms down at their side, and they'll just do this. Then they'll grab the bar. And that's totally fine. So they can avoid doing this monstrosity. So he said he's available for remote tech support in exchange for insulin in lieu of money because of growth factor memes.
Dude,
man,
I wish I could grow my own insulin. So it's so funny.
Can't synthesize insulin. Rip doesn't offer that service.
No, you can through animal, and that's how they used to do it back in the day. But like, so we saw like the formula and just like the process. It's so elaborate. I'm like, no one in their fucking right mind has enough time to do this in the facilities, right? So basically, you need about 2,000 pounds of beef or pork pancreas to make about 8 ounces of animal synthetic, or I shouldn't say synthetic, but animal insulin.
Man, this squat is awesome. So this guy has an incredibly low elbow position. Can you see that, Chase?
Yeah.
So imagine if him and the last guy combined powers.
It'd be totally perfect.
To
This dude's
create
like, yeah, this dude is back squatting a front squat.
Yeah, man. These are always just fun to watch. I just enjoy these. There's always a little bit of pop somewhere at the top, like they're gonna kind of like push press it out. You know, once they get to lockout, they're just gonna pop it off their back.
You know, this is kind of like a painting in a way because it's like, you know, you're up to each person's interpretation of a squat. So that dude previous was just like, no, I'm gonna paint it like this. This guy's like, no, it has to look like this. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah,
but wrong at the same time.
Cool, but wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like if you're attempting to do a high bar squat and you're like dead set on high bar, you are looking straight down. So his eyeballs are looking down. We can see that. I would widen your stance up, and then I would attempt to control the descent a little bit. You're shooting forward and back of midfoot 3 times during this repetition. One of the
Yeah.
reasons that we like kind of the leaned over low bar is because it really enforces a good midfoot balance. Your center of pressure on your foot has to be over the midfoot. The bar is there too. It tends to be really stable for most people. Whereas this version, you can get a lot of rebounding back and forth with the knees. Like it can just get a lot really forward and backwards. Yeah, I would say that. Do you think this is in the high bar position, or do you think he has it low bar?
Oh, this is definitely high bar.
Okay. Yeah, so like if you're in the traditional high bar position, just commit to it. Like look straight ahead, slow down, control your bottom position, don't wobble around. And then honestly, man, just read the book.
Yeah, I mean, granted, like this guy does have a long torso, and if you were to move the bar down an inch, it still will look somewhat kind of the same. But again, he has to, like you were saying, just feel the sensation of a more horizontal back angle, and then utilizing the hips while being in the midfoot.
Yeah, so like even if you're like, oh well, I don't want to have a more horizontal back angle, or I don't want to lean over for these other reasons, think about it just in reference to the ability to stay balanced over the middle of your foot. That's really valuable. It looked like he could have done this for like 12 reps.
Yep. And like,
so like
go ahead.
I was gonna say, even if you put a substantially heavy amount of weight on the bar for him, which is probably another like 60 pounds, then that midfoot balance is gonna start rearing its head.
Yeah, and what I was gonna say is like even though he's trying to his best to keep a vertical back angle, he has to lean over just due to the balance, right?
Yeah. It just be like that sometimes.
Yep.
I'm
Don't
sorry,
fight
man.
it, man. Just let it happen.
Accept it.
Lean over.
Accept it. I like the no camera lifestyle. That's good. All right, I gotta pull up your Instagram up, Chase. So we gotta find
Why?
Just gotta check. Anything been going on there recently? Anything of note?
And I need to post, but I'm starting to squat without some knee sleeves. Like my knees feel way better.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Kind of been rehabbing them because I have some bad tendonitis a little bit. I shouldn't say bad, but it flares up every now and then. And man, I've been doing my Olympic lifts without my my knee wraps, squatting without knee wraps, so it feels pretty good.
Any revelations on the Olympic lifts recently?
The clean, man, it feels solid. I think my biggest thing is I got to incorporate more power, but at the same time as I do more power, my knee tendonitis starts flaring up. But so kind of just managing that's been helping. And then what I've been doing on the snatch is doing more hang stuff. And I think what's maybe causing all this looping and stuff like that is just I'm losing thoracic extension. My pull off the floor again looks solid, but it's just halfway up. I just kind of round my back and
bonk it away.
Kind of just have that.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'm gonna try to do some more, maybe like a low block. I think I had the blocks way too heavy, and it was just kind of throwing me off, or not too heavy, too high last time. Maybe do like an inch or two of reduced range of motion and try to fuck around with that. But I don't know. This is going to be an ever uphill battle, I think.
I was good advice though. It's like I just need to give him more power, and it's like, yeah, you do. Yeah. Good advice for all of lifting, frankly. Just be more powerful. It's called powerlifting for a reason. Anything else? Any parting shots for the lifting with type 1 diabetes episode?
Man, just get on top of your blood sugar. Always check it.
One question for you
I prefer.
while your brain is thinking there. How long into this whole process did you get to the point where you don't have to actually check it by figures and you could just kind of, like freestyle it a little bit? How long until you were comfortable doing
It took a lot,
that?
man. It took about probably about 6 or 7 years, and even
6 or
still,
7 years.
sometimes it feels like I'm getting I should say like a false reading or like a false sensation. Sometimes I'm like, man, I feel fine, and then my blood sugar is a little bit higher than what I expected, and then other times it's like, dude, I feel like my fucking blood sugar's to the roof, and it's actually low.
Interesting.
So
Okay. So do you think
varies.
maybe another 10 years you'll have your mind tricks, your Jedi mind tricks?
Hopefully,
fully,
another 10 years, man. I break into a top secret government facility, and I just put another new pancreas in my body.
a
Don't
new
have to deal with
robo
this shit.
pancreas. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. G-Log, I was thinking about that. I was thinking whenever Chase said that, yeah, all lifting is powerlifting if you use power. Very true. Exceedingly true. Yeah. But yeah, all right. That's it for the lifting with type 1 diabetes. I don't think we'll do a type 2 one, frankly.
Nah, it kind of just all collaborates together and stuff.
Yeah, frankly, just, I don't know, maybe just don't eat for 2 years in a row. Just do one of those crazy
Yeah.
fasts. Yeah. But I think that's it. Check Chase's out Instagram, my website. We updated the Starting Strength coaching directory. We have a nice new website for that. Drop a review there. But I think that's it. Thanks everybody for watching.